6. Logos and reason. The first step in solving any problem is to understand it. A clear understanding of a problem often leads to the solution. Already, long ago, from when we sold our vote to no man, the people have abdicated our duties for the people who, once upon a time, handed out military command, high civil office, legions, everything, now restrains itself and anxiously hopes for just 2 things, bread and circuses. Juvenal, Roman poet, think about the word juvenile. People lie but rarely do it well. Mountains of lies can be exposed with only one truth, and things are easier to disprove than they are to prove. To disprove a hypothesis, all that has to be done is to show it false in one instance. The world of logic and reason is slanted against liars, and that's unfair for a lot of people. They do not have an even or even a fair chance. They need political correctness to rebalance the scales. No longer does the West stand for truth and justice, according to Logos. There you have it. People were being used as pawns in the service of a larger messianic ideology, which was and still is essentially against practical reason, against Logos, and against all mankind. What's the solution to this madness? More subversive movements? More insurrections in places like Ferguson and Dallas? The answer to that is no. The solution is simple. People need to submit their will to practical reason and Logos. Alexander Solzhenitsyn. There is only one option, and the truth always sounds silly because it's so much simpler than most people can imagine. We vote the bums out, and we've been inoculated against that idea. We must object to what's happening and do so in a lawful way. That doesn't mean holding a sign at a street rally. That means writing a letter and putting your name on it. We write letters to show that we know what is going on. Without objection, the government is doing nothing wrong. It's a simple idea that's been forgotten. We only get the government we deserve in a free society. If we're to have a free society, we have to watch the government. But most of all, we have to penetrate the mind control and the political correctness of many and return reason to be the tool from which everybody makes judgments. Love thy Lord thy God above all else simply means to love reason above all else in Christianity. Compare the need for safety from barbarians with the desire for lower economic loads with the need for leadership. Leadership is progressive. Leadership puts us in chains. Law sets us free. Governments write and enforce law. Who ever said governments were needed to lead? Rational law is written in Kant's Metaphysics of Moral, so much more carefully considered than most of the ideas you'll find on the internet, and it is very clear and logical. It's a bad idea to come out with your own ideas and just start writing a constitution, start talking about things the way you think they should be just because you think they should be that way. There's too much of that. We have a lot of old ideas we've forgotten, and we're generating new ones that are fundamentally bad. Now, if you're riding down a path on a horse, and let's say there's lots of wood and the path is crooked and there's lots of rocks, and all of a sudden you let go of the reins of that horse, either voluntarily or by accident, the horse is running out of control. Now, you don't stop and start wondering about, well, who owns this horse? Or could I have gotten a better horse? You try and find a way to grab the reins. Doesn't matter if UFOs exist or if there's a great big government conspiracy to cover up free energy. Now, people that are saying this really don't know anything about science, not even very basic science. I have a degree in electrical engineering. So UFOs, free energy, the Rothschilds, all that stuff's really irrelevant. What we have to do is focus on getting the reins of the horse back. And primarily how we do that is to learn about law. Now, it's nobody's responsibility to defend your lawful rights. It's your responsibility to know the law and to defend your lawful rights. If you hire an attorney, then you're giving up lawful rights. You concede to be a debtor for this international debt that I explained how lawfully it doesn't really exist. It only exists in the imaginations of the politicians and attorneys and bankers. But when we hire an attorney, we concede that debt exists. And there's been free men talking about this. There's a giant free men movement. And a lot of the stuff they say is wrong, but a lot of the stuff they say is right. And the stuff that they say is right makes sense. There are lots of things we can do. One, we can start buying domestically made goods. If you think that you deserve to live in the comfort of Western society, and you deserve the privilege of buying goods that are made by slave labor, buying from children that are making 25 cents an hour under forced labor conditions, your thinking is severely corrupted and rotten. We have to start operating lawfully and doing lawful things and not be hypocrites. 2, we can start using cash. When the banks have your money, the banks own your money legally. They give it back to you voluntarily. Now, we've seen the banks go in Greece and take people's money without their permission. So actually carrying cash is more convenient, it's faster, and when you're in line in, say, a grocery store and you're using electronic money, it just delays everybody else. It's faster just to pull out $50 or $60 or whatever you're paying for groceries at that time. 3, recognize that the universities, the networks, and the press have all been corrupted. And this whole global warming scam is prima facie evidence for that. In case you don't know it, this whole global warming was created as a lie, and it's all explained in a document called the Report from Iron Mountain. It explains the motivations behind creating the environmental movement. 4, you can read the report from Iron Mountain and you can watch the real face of the European Union to find out where we're going with this world government. These guys are writing 200 laws a day, 300 laws a day. They're reading them off every minute. Nobody's reading the legislation. And the legislation is being written in a deep, dark place that nobody knows anything about. Start learning start learning history from alternative sources rather than the corporate government and university sources. Everything they have told you has pretty much been lies by omission. The alternative history is a lot more interesting and makes a lot more sense. 6, it doesn't matter who runs society, the Jews, the Jesuits, the banks, or the free markets. If we are to have a free society, we must return to rule. And we can do that lawfully. And the problem here is that a lot of people don't know anything at all about the law. 7, learn about the law. Although much of what has been said in the free man movement has been wrong, much of it has been right. And these guys are trying to shovel through something that's essentially covered up in sophistry, licentiousness, and intimidation. And it is very difficult. I've read a lot on it. And it is very confusing, and there's a lot of people working on this. Now, the networks have done hit pieces against people like Dean Clifford and Robert Menard. That's the networks. Of course they're going to do that. They're owned by the same people that are printing the money. So you have to really do your own research, get into the free man movement. Robert Menard did a great movie called Bursting Bubbles of Government Deception. Dean Clifford's on there explaining stuff that he's learning about trusts. And you can get the books on trusts and read them yourself, which I have, and I've read through a lot of them. 8, learn about monetary reform and support monetary reform candidates. It's not too late and we haven't lost. If we're going to win, we're going to get monetary reform. If we're not going to win, we're not going to get monetary reform. The whole thing hinges on monetary reform. Now, to lawfully object to something that the government is doing, you have to write a letter. You can't stand on the street with a sign because your name's not attached to it. There's no responsibility associated with what you're saying. Lawfully, if you're going to say something, then there has to be a certain amount of responsibility behind what you're saying. They have to know who's saying it. So you have to write a letter and you have to sign your name. Now, personally, I don't do this because I'm dealing with Revenue Canada and I choose not to be represented. So I can't protest, but believe me, I've written letters to Revenue Canada. And that's been my way because I am trying to go a little bit deeper into this. But if you object to something, you have to state your objections. If somebody comes and starts digging up your front lawn and you're sitting on the front lawn watching them and you don't object, and they're just digging up your front lawn, then they're not doing anything wrong without your objection. Now, these representatives are there to serve two masters. They're there to serve you, and they're there to serve the banks. But you and me and we have been silent. So consequently, the politician's job has been a lot easier, just to vote yes for everything. Now, a lot of these guys that go into politics and become MPs and stuff, I don't think they really know shit from toothpaste when it comes down to what the intentions are of all this legislation and the direction that it's going. And even if they did, they can't do anything about it because they're not receiving the objections that they need to receive from us. So because we're not objecting is why we're being led into this New World Order. Nobody wants this. There's probably 100 people on the whole planet that will benefit from all this. The rest of us will not benefit, but we are not objecting. So it is going in this direction. And the people in power know what's going on, but they can't object without the political backing. They need the political backing in order to have the power. There's lots of people within this establishment that really don't know don't like what's going on. But without the political backing and the political will, nothing can happen. Everything hinges on political will. We have to learn about the law, learn how to object lawfully, and most importantly, really learn about monetary reform. If we get monetary reform, we will go back to sanity. If we don't go back to monetary reform, we will continue to go down this progressive world of, it's an inverted, perverted, twisted, backwards, upside down world that's really based on insanity. And that's really what they're trying to do. They're warping people's minds, warping their thinking, and people can really no longer apply reason to political situations. Another thing that they do is to prevent people from talking about politics. Somehow people are self-censoring and not talking about politics. Talking about politics is a really normal conversation between people. People shouldn't really self-censor about talking about politics, and they shouldn't really censor other people's opinions. People often get criticized and in many cases persecuted for their political views. This runs contrary to logos and reason.